Hello and welcome to another intensive care hotline and intensive care at home live stream. In today's topic, I want to talk about ICU is telling me my dad will never come off the ventilator. Is this true? And as you know by now, most live streams that I'm doing here, they are really answering questions that we get from clients or readers or YouTube subscribers all the time. You know, they're also driven by phone calls that I have with clients, or Zoom calls or Skype calls or WhatsApp calls, whatever it is, because they are real questions that our clients are asking. And this one is really a question that stood out, and because of how the ICU team reacted and what information we gathered after we spoke to the client, and then got more information from the client. Hello, I still can't read your name because the name comes up in letters that I can't read, but doesn't matter. I want to welcome you anyway. I know you've been here before and I appreciate you joining. Okay, so before we dive into today's topic, I just want to quickly talk about what makes me qualified to talk about this topic. So I'm an intensive care nurse by background. I have worked in intensive care for over 20 years in 3 different countries. And I have worked as a nurse unit manager for over 5 years in intensive care. I have managed 2 different intensive care units and managed, hundreds of staff really in ICU, including, large nursing team, but also doctors, stakeholders within a hospital, such as general managers, directors of nursing, and so forth. I am also the founder of Intensive Care at Home, where we provide intensive care at home nursing services for long-term ventilated patients at home instead of in intensive care. We're predominantly operating at the moment in major metropolitan cities in Australia, Melbourne, Sydney in particular, but also in Brisbane, Adelaide, Perth, and we could also provide services in Alice Springs or Darwin, or in Tasmania, Hobart, and in particular. I'm also the founder of Intensive Care Hotline, a consulting and advocacy service for families in intensive care. And I started Intensive Care at Home and Intensive Care Hotline around the same time, 2012, 2013. So we've been operating for a long time with Intensive Care Hotline in particular. We're consulting and advocating for families in intensive care all around the world, all day, every day. So a couple of housekeeping issues. I do want to go through today's topic, and then I will answer any questions, either related to today's topic or any other questions. I can see you already have sent a question, but I will come to this later as it's not quite related to today's topic, but I certainly will answer it at the end of today's presentation. I also want to quickly highlight that I changed the times. You might have seen that in the last couple of weeks I scheduled the calls for 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in the US on a Saturday night. I realized that might be too early for some of the folks coming on these calls, so I pushed it back to 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is 4:30 p.m. Pacific Time. And for me at the moment, it's 11:30 a.m. on a Sunday in Melbourne, Sydney time, Australia. Anyway, so let's dive into today's topic. ICU is telling me my dad will never come off the ventilator. Is this true? So true story. I was talking to a client the other day. He said, my elderly father, I think he would have been late 70s, early 80s, has been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. He has been more or less living independently at home, needed more and more help, but not full nursing care, but just needed more support, I guess, generally speaking. And then part of Parkinson's is, having difficulty swallowing, having saliva, production, and and it's difficult to manage the saliva for patients. Anyway, he ended up with an aspiration pneumonia and ended up in ICU on a ventilator. And the client reached out maybe 3-4 days into his father going into ICU and dealing with the aspiration pneumonia. He was in an induced coma. They were giving him antibiotics for the aspiration pneumonia. And then they were, slowly trying to wake him up. But obviously that can be difficult with Parkinson's in particular, because patients are dementious or confused, and they had difficulty waking him up. Cutting a long story short, the ICU team told the son, who's also the power of attorney, your father will never come off the ventilator, so you should make a decision to either do a tracheostomy now or move him to comfort care, withdraw treatment and let him die. So obviously our question to the client was, well, do you have any evidence for what they're claiming, that your father will never come off the ventilator? And he said, no, it's just going by what the doctors are telling him. So, it comes back to, what I keep saying over and over again. The biggest challenge for families in intensive care is simply that they don't know what they don't know. They don't know what to look for. They don't know what questions to ask. They don't know their rights, and they don't know how to manage doctors and nurses in intensive care. And that's exactly what we're dealing with here. So then I asked the client, could he please send me a picture of the ventilator? Could he send me ideally an arterial blood gas? Could he send me medications he's on and so forth? Anyway, the client actually had a picture of the ventilator lined up already, and he sent it to me, while we were on the call. And funnily enough, it turns out that the client's father was on minimum ventilation settings, i.e., assuming that blood gases were correlating and were okay, and assuming he was awake, he could have been extubated. And here is the other thing that is important to understand in those situations. So let's just say he can't swallow, and he might need a tracheostomy because he can't swallow. Maybe he's unable to, maybe he's swallowing, or his swallow is weak, and maybe therefore he ended up with an aspiration pneumonia. Okay, and maybe the risk is that it may happen again, right? That means his father might need a tracheostomy, but that doesn't mean he can't come off the ventilator. A lot of families in intensive care mix up that a tracheostomy is synonym to ventilation. Now, it often is, especially in the beginning, in sort of when patients go from mechanical ventilation, breathing tube induced coma to a tracheostomy, there may be some time going by before patients with a tracheostomy can be weaned off the ventilator. But a tracheostomy is not synonym to ventilation. There's people living in the community with tracheostomies that do not require mechanical ventilation. There's also people in hospitals with a tracheostomy that do not require mechanical ventilation. So I think a clear distinction needs to be made here, that a tracheostomy is not synonym with mechanical ventilation. So I hope that helps to, clarify some the environment, and clarify what is possible, what's not possible, and also for you to understand that ICU teams are often only telling you half of the story, if that, and it's up to you to ask all the right questions. They are busy, I get it, but they also want to stay in control of the narrative. And clearly, by the ICU team telling our client that his father will never come off the ventilator, they're trying to stay in control of the narrative, because what it could mean for them is, A, it's easy for them to quote unquote sell the family on a withdrawal of treatment or withdrawal of life support, or B, it's easy for them, because this particular client is in the US, it's easy for the ICU to tell him, oh, well, let's do a tracheostomy, and then let's send your dad to LTAC or a skilled nursing facility or subacute or rehab facility, which from our experience is not in the best interest of a patient, as those facilities are not set up to look after ventilators or tracheostomies. We've just had confirmation of that again yesterday, where I was talking, it was actually this morning, I was talking to a gentleman in the US who says his 43-year-old daughter has gone into an LTAC after 2 weeks or 3 weeks in ICU. She ended up with a ventilator and a tracheostomy, and now she's in an LTAC. And he only found our information after the daughter went into LTAC, and he says, well, it's not even the better version of a nursing home, it's just a disaster area. And he would like to get her out as quickly as possible because they're not doing anything, right? And they have a 1-to-5 nurse-to-patient ratio, not with ICU nurses, and there's a disaster waiting there. A ventilated or a tracheostomy patient needs the 1-to-1 nurse-to-patient ratio with an intensive care nurse that's tracheostomy competent. We know that patients have died in hospitals and in the community if that nurse-to-patient ratio can't be established with ICU nurses. Simple as that. That's what we do with intensive care at home. We send an ICU nurse into a patient's or client's home where they have ventilation or tracheostomy or both, and enable them to have a genuine alternative at home to an intensive care bed. Coming back to our client, so we established that the client was very close to have at least a trial extubation, right? And don't get me wrong, a trial extubation for someone with dementia, i.e. Parkinson's, can be challenging because many patients in intensive care after an induced coma can be they can be confused even without being dementious, right? It's part of getting all the sedatives and opiates while they're in intensive care. So, you know, it's often not an easy undertaking to extubate someone because they can be confused, and that can lead to them being re-intubated in the worst case scenario. Anyway, so in this situation, you know, I also need to highlight, when is it clear that someone will never come off the ventilator, right? Is it even worth mentioning? Is that even something that doctors, nurses should say? Well, I guess there is probably a little bit of room for that, where someone can confidently say that someone will never come off the ventilator. So there are some examples for that. So, for example, again, with intensive care at home, we are looking after clients at home that have, for example, a C1 or C2 spinal injury. And I think it is fair to say that as of 2022, those patients will never, or clients will never come off the ventilator. I think that is fair to say. Bear in mind that is in 2022, assuming a cure can't be found for C1 or 2C spinal injuries. Maybe a cure will be found, and then those people can come off the ventilator. But I'm talking to what we're dealing with in 2022. I would say it's fair to say that in 2022, those clients cannot come off a ventilator. Other clients that can't come off a ventilator, or other patients, would be MND, motor neuron disease, in the end stages. You know, often they start out on BiPAP, non-invasive BiPAP, and if they deteriorate, as they often do, they then end up with a tracheostomy and ventilation for the rest of their lives as well. Again, that is in 2022, assuming no cure can be found. Okay. Next, last night I was talking to another client who has their father in intensive care for 5 months. Their father had open heart surgery and ended up with complications, cardiac arrest, follow MIs, heart attacks, you know, and he was ventilated with a breathing tube for much longer than expected. He then got extubated, he then aspirated, got re-intubated, ended up with a tracheostomy, and as part of his prolonged ventilation, he now ends up with pulmonary fibrosis, also known as scar tissue in the lungs, secondary to all the complications. Now, scar tissue in the lungs means it's scar tissue, and as we all know from any scars we might have, scar tissue doesn't heal, i.e. the lungs are really stiff, the lung compliance is low, there is a lot of resistance in the lungs by getting air in. Therefore, someone with pulmonary fibrosis stuck on a ventilator with a tracheostomy will find it very difficult to be weaned off a ventilator. And when we looked at the ventilator settings of this particular gentleman, he's on a pressure support of 15, even though he's breathing spontaneously in CPAP and pressure support, he's on a pressure support of 15. And in order to be weaned off a ventilator, his pressure support really should come down to 10 or less, and the volumes that he's breathing should not drop. His volumes are adequate at around 300 to 400 mils per breath. His breathing rate is adequate at around 15 to 25 breaths per minute. Everything looks adequate. His blood gases are good, but his chest x-ray is very ordinary with a pulmonary fibrosis. And as soon as you drop down the pressure support, his volumes will drop, his respiratory rate will go up, his blood gases, the PO2 might drop, CO2 might climb, and then you have to go up again with the pressure support. And because the lung condition with pulmonary fibrosis is almost like irreversible, therefore I would say that for this gentleman it's also reasonably unlikely that he can be weaned off a ventilator. What are the options for patients with pulmonary fibrosis or scar tissue in the lungs? The options are often a lung transplant. And then it comes down to, how old are you? How old is your loved one? What's the cutoff for a lung transplant? In this situation, this is a 63-year-old gentleman, with lung fibrosis. And hopefully, they can put him on a lung transplant list to, help him get off the ventilator and help him make a new start. But other options for this gentleman, which we discussed with the client last night as well, is simply, he could go home with intensive care at home. Clearly, this is right up our alley because, again, if he can't come off a ventilator, similar to the examples that I've just given, like C1, C2 spinal injury, motor neuron disease, just to name a few, he can go home with ICU nurses 24 hours a day. And that creates a win-win situation for everyone. It cuts the cost of an intensive care bed by 50%. It frees up a highly sought after and in-demand intensive care bed. It frees up staff, equipment in ICU. More importantly, it improves the quality of life, or in some instances, the quality of end of life for patients that are stuck in ICU. When we talk to the family about this client who's been in ICU now for 5 months, he's fed up. He's not depressed, but it might just be a matter of time until he's becoming depressed. And the ICU team is not really involving him in his care, which is really appalling. The ICU basically stopped talking to him because they don't really want to tell him what their agenda is. And their agenda is, well, if a solution can't be found for him to go home, that they want to withdraw treatment. They basically want to kill a patient that's awake, that understands full well what's going on, and they don't want to talk to him, which is appalling, So our recommendation to this family is to, keep asking for home care. We can help you with that. And then hopefully you can go home very soon. Again, the funding is there in most of the cases. It's just a matter of talking to the right people, and that would include us, because, we wouldn't be in business if we wouldn't know how to access the funding sources. So, but to bring it back to if you're watching this video and you're wondering, is my mom, my dad, my spouse, my child unweanable, or can they never come off a ventilator? You should question this, and for the reasons that I just mentioned. Most people in ICU can come off the ventilator, right? Even though they might need a tracheostomy, right? A tracheostomy is not synonym to ventilation. Okay, now I do just quickly want to take a break there from this topic, and I want to answer your question where you says, my girlfriend 18 is still in a coma 60 days now. Which 14 days was induced? Okay, I do remember talking to you on one of the live streams here a few weeks ago. Can you give me more information? When you say she's still not awake, has she woken up at all? Is she more awake? What's her Glasgow coma scale? I don't know whether you recall that I asked you last time whether you do have a Glasgow coma score, because that would help me to determine what's really happening. So if you could share that information, that would be really great. Okay, while I'm waiting for you to give me some more information, let's go back to today's topic. So again, very few patients in ICU are quote unquote unweanable. I don't know whether that's even a term, or are in a position where they can't be weaned off a ventilator, right? We have, as a matter of fact, weaned patients off at home with our intensive care at home nursing service, predominantly children, but still doesn't matter whether they're adults or children, they can be weaned off at home as well. You know, no need to wean them off in ICU. A lot more is possible at home than you think there is, you know. So always question, you know, you always need to question that what the ICU team is telling you is actually that they are facts, and you should fact check this with us. You know, we can provide you that second opinion, and for this particular client, that's exactly what he did. He said, well, can you verify to me that my dad is unweanable? And we could tell him within less than 5 minutes that his dad is weanable. Okay. Okay, the coma scale should be 3 because she doesn't respond to anything. The pupils still don't respond to after the 14 days of induced coma. She had an edema. Wow, that's very sad. That's very sad that she's still a Glasgow coma scale of 3. How many? It would be a few weeks now, because I remember, I think I've spoken to you twice even on this live stream. It would be a few weeks now from memory. Is she getting, are they stimulating her, and is she getting mobilized? Those would be my other 2 questions that I think are important to help you with some answers. Is she getting stimulated, and is she getting mobilized, and is she getting physical therapy or physiotherapy? Okay, well, I'm waiting for your answer. So you know, you always need to verify. Intensive care is such a highly specialized area that, you know, you really need to dig deep. You need to dig very deep in situations like that. And, you know, when families come to us, they come to us with questions like, oh, can my dad be weaned off the ventilator, yes or no? Now, in this situation, it was a clear yes answer. However, it also took some digging from us, you know. And same with the question that you're having now, you know, will my girlfriend wake up or not? It depends, you know. We need all the information, you know. When someone is in intensive care, there are dozens of things happening simultaneously, you know, and only if you look at all the aspects of care, all the aspects of the diagnostics, X-ray results, CT scans, blood results, medications someone is on, pre-medical history, ventilator settings, blood gases, and the list goes on. Only after you look at all of that, only then can you really make a call on what's going to happen next and what the outcome is going to be, right? So it's very rarely is it as simple as, you know, very rarely is it as simple as, will my loved one wake up from this? The answer is often, it depends. And the answer is often by looking at the fine print, so to speak. You know, the quickest way we can help you is by either talking to doctors and nurses directly, or another quick way is to look at medical records, and or ideally do a combination of both. look at medical records and talk to doctors. That's the quickest way we can help you. Right, so you're saying, I really don't know. Every time I go to see her, I massage and stretch her hands and toes, talk to her and touch her face. Any story from a TBI patient that can give me hope? Look, there are stories from TBI patients that wake up. It must be now at least a couple of months, and you're telling me if a Glasgow Coma scale is 3, it's a difficult one. Right. And I guess you definitely need to find out if they are mobilizing her and if they are giving her physical therapy, if they are stimulating her. You definitely need to find out about it. You definitely need to find out about that. It's going to be really important for you. Because, for example, if she, for lack of a better term, if she withers away in her bed and no one's talking to her, no one's stimulating her, and that she's not getting mobilized, it'll be very difficult for her to wake up, I believe. She needs that constant stimulation, I believe. So, I think last time you ruled out that she's still sedated. I think you ruled that out last time. But you should keep ruling it out that she's, for example, still sedated, or that she's having seizures. That's all I can say. Okay. So really, I need more information, to help you with this. Okay, coming back to our initial question, ICU is telling me my dad will never come off the ventilator. Is this true? So I've given you examples when someone really can't be weaned off a ventilator. I've shared with you that most patients in ICU can be weaned off a ventilator. There's probably also another issue that needs to be mentioned here. I know the way I framed the question was, I should have said invasive ventilation, right? Because the client that approached us, their dad was on invasive ventilation with a breathing tube. Now, there's plenty of people out there that need BiPAP or CPAP, right? They have BiPAP or CPAP and without a breathing tube, and they can be on it for the rest of their lives as well. I'll give you another example. We are currently looking after a client at home with intensive care at home here in Melbourne, and he is on BiPAP 24 hours a day. He's got end-stage lung cancer, and he's got metastases building up in his lung, and he needs the BiPAP 24 hours a day, sometimes with oxygen. When he's at rest, he doesn't need oxygen, but he needs the BiPAP 16/7, 16 EPAP and 7 IPAP. When he's walking, he needs to be put on oxygen, but when he's at rest, he can breathe room air. But he can't really be off the BiPAP for more than 2 minutes, right? So, yes, that is another case where someone can't be weaned off a ventilator, but please keep in mind, this is non-invasive ventilation, BiPAP or CPAP, sometimes it's also called VPAP, and, those are other scenarios as well where someone can't be weaned off a ventilator too. Okay, now you're saying sometimes she has a high blood pressure too, but they keep putting less and less medicine for blood pressure. That's good. That's really good. Okay, hi Louis. Thanks for your question. Louis says, my dad was on a ventilator from COVID for 2 months, then had a tracheostomy done and was hooked for 1 more month. He survived, thank God. Louis, can you share, first of all, thanks for sharing that. Can you share whether your dad is off the ventilator now? You're saying he survived, but it doesn't, you're not saying whether he's off the ventilator and he has the trach removed. Now, you're also saying in regards to your girlfriend, I think the medicine for her blood pressure is Levofed. Yeah, probably Levofed. But is she still on the Levofed? Because if she is, she might still be critical, right? Would also be nice if you can type your name in there, because then I can address you with a name, because I still can't read your name. It's in a different it's in different letters that I can't read, but it would be nice to, if you tell me your first name, so I can address you with your first name. Yeah, so, but if she's still on Levofed, that's a concern, because that would also almost suggest she's still critical. And Kostas, oh, very nice, Kostas, thank you so much. Oh, you might be in Greece. Kostas is a Greek name, I believe. But anyway, thank you, Kostas. So yes, it would be good to know she had 2.2 mils of Levofed. Okay, right. Okay, why is she getting Levofed? Why is she getting Levofed? I really don't know, Kostas, but that's a question I would try and ask if I was you. Why is she on Levofed? Okay, and Louis, it would be nice to hear from you what happened to your dad. If he's off the ventilator now, that would be really nice. In any case, I'm sure many families in intensive care in the last 2.5 years would have said that the ICU team in the beginning of COVID would have said to them, well, your loved one is not going to survive, and if they do survive, they will never come off a ventilator. Countless families would have heard that, and yet here is an example like Louis shared. His dad has come off the ventilator despite COVID, or he survived at least. Okay, Kostas, you are saying because of her high blood pressure. Okay, Levofed, Kostas, usually brings blood pressure up, not down. So if she's got high blood pressure, she wouldn't receive Levofed. Levofed increases blood pressure, doesn't decrease blood pressure. Right? But her head is not swollen anymore. Okay, that's good. That's good. Levofed is for low blood pressure. You better double check. Again, families in intensive care don't know what they don't know. Okay, so yes, I wouldn't, if I had a dollar for every family that would have told us in the last 2 years, especially with COVID, that their loved ones will never come off the ventilator if they do survive, it was a ridiculously high number. Anyway, so I hope that sheds light on today's topic, that most patients in intensive care will be able to come off the ventilator. Yes, there are exceptions to the rule, 100%. And you need to do your research and find out what's applicable to your loved one's situation or to your situation. Really important that you draw that distinction. Okay, if there are no other questions, then I would like to slowly wrap this up today. I will do another YouTube live stream next week at the same time, and I will tell you what next week's topic is. Next week's topic is, just give me a second. Next week's topic is, I signed for my husband to be taken out of life support, and now I feel like we murdered him. I was forced. Very interesting topic next week, but again, we get those comments from clients all the time. Okay, now Kostas, you're saying, doesn't her age play a role if she's gonna be good? 100%. Your girlfriend is 18. I'd say, age should be in her favor. 100%. You got to be very patient here, and I know that's not going to help you, but it's very hard to say whether people A will survive, B what's the outcome. It's going to be really difficult to make any predictions. What I can say is, if you do withdraw treatment, then she will have passed away, and then it's too late. You can't turn back from that, as far as I'm concerned. But again, these are decisions I can't make. I can only help you in making the best decision, and I can only help you in trying to get the best care and treatment for your girlfriend. So the next YouTube live stream is again in 1 week, in 7 days. It'll be 7:30 Eastern Standard Time on a Saturday night, 4:30 Pacific Time on a Saturday afternoon. That'll be the 26th of November, and it'll be 11:30 Sunday morning in Sydney, Melbourne time, for me here. So that's for next Sunday. Now, Kostas, you're saying that, do doctors always say the worst case scenario? Yes, they do. They do. They want to stay in control of the narrative. So they, if they told you, Kostas, that, we look after your girlfriend, she'll be here for 2 weeks, and then, she will leave intensive care alive, and, her brain has recovered. If they said that to you and then it wouldn't happen, A, they wouldn't be in control of the narrative, and B, you could potentially sue them for misleading you. So you got to look at it from their perspective. They will always say things to protect them so that you can't sue them. Right? Got to see it from that angle. So, okay. So I do want to wrap this up today. If your loved one is quote unquote unweanable, or if you want to have weaning done at home, again, you should contact us also at Intensive Care at Home, especially if you're in Australia, where we can take your loved one home with NDIS funding, for example, but also other funding avenues. So you should contact us if your mum, your dad, your spouse, your child is in a similar situation where they can't be weaned off a ventilator. We can definitely help you getting your loved one out of ICU. Now, if you have a loved one in ICU, you should definitely contact us at intensivecarehotline.com. Call us on one of the numbers on the top of our website, or simply send us an email to support@intensivecarehotline.com. Also, check out our membership for families in intensive care at intensivecaresupport.org. There you have access to me and my team, and we answer questions, anything intensive care and intensive care at home related, 24 hours a day in the membership area or via email. Also, if you need a medical record review, you should contact us as well at Intensive Care Hotline, and we can help you with a medical record review while your loved one is in intensive care or after intensive care, especially if you're suspecting medical negligence. I appreciate if you do subscribe to my YouTube channel, if you give this video a like, if you give it a thumbs up, share the video with your friends and families. If you do subscribe to my YouTube channel, you get regular updates for families in intensive care and intensive care and intensive care at home. I do regular YouTube live streams. And, comment below what you want to see next and what questions and insights you have from this video. And I look forward to talking to you later in the week with my quick tip videos, and also next week again on the YouTube live. Thank you so much for watching. I will talk to you very soon. Take care.